Imagine standing in a battlefield, holding a weapon in your shaking hands, waiting for thousands of enemies to appear. You think victory is impossible. You think your army is stronger. You think this battle will end quickly. But then something strange happens. The men in front of you stop moving. Some begin stepping backward. Others start whispering one name. Shaka. Not because they had already lost. Because they were afraid of what would happen next. The strange part? Shaka Zulu did not begin as an unstoppable king. He was not born into unlimited power. He was not born with the biggest army. So why did enemies keep failing against him? What did they see that made people fear him? And what was the secret that changed everything? Because the answer was not just strength. It was something much more dangerous. Part 1. The boy nobody expected. Long before warriors feared his name, Shaka was just a young boy. Nobody looked at him and thought, that boy will change history. He faced rejection. He faced hardship. He grew up watching power from a distance instead of living inside it. And sometimes the people who begin with the least become the most dangerous. Because they learn things others never need to learn. While others felt comfortable, Shaka was watching, learning, waiting. But nobody knew that inside his mind, something was slowly forming. Something that would later change warfare itself. Retention loop. And what he created would make enemies question whether they even wanted to fight. But before that happened, something unexpected changed his life forever. Part 2. The change. At the time, battles often followed familiar patterns. Warriors fought. People retreated. Armies survived and returned again. But Shaka began asking a different question. What if the problem wasn't the warriors? What if the problem was the way people fought? That question changed everything. Because while others followed old methods, Shaka wanted something different. Something faster. Something harder. Something that gave enemies less time to think. And when people finally saw what he was building, some thought he was crazy. Others thought it would fail. They were wrong. Retention loop. Because soon, enemies would discover something terrifying. The battlefield itself was changing. Part 3. Fear begins. Imagine seeing an army coming toward you. You expect them to stop. You expect distance. You expect time. Instead they keep moving. Closer, closer, closer. Suddenly the battle no longer feels normal. Panic starts spreading. People stop thinking clearly. Because sometimes people lose the battle inside their minds before losing it on the battlefield. And that is when fear becomes stronger than weapons. But here is the strange question. Was Shaka winning because of strength? Or because people were already defeated before the fight even started? Part 4. Mystery and ending. Even today people continue debating his legacy. Some remember him as a brilliant military leader. Some see him differently. But one thing is difficult to deny. Enemies expected victory. Instead they found something they didn't expect. A leader changing the rules. And when someone changes the rules, the old game stops working. Maybe that was the real secret all along. Not bigger armies. Not magic. Not luck. He forced people to fight a battle they were never prepared for. And that raises one final question. How many powerful people in history actually won because they were stronger? And how many won because they made everyone else think differently? Maybe the most dangerous weapon was never the spear. Maybe it was the mind. Imagine standing in a battlefield. Dust fills the air. Your hands are shaking. You are holding your weapon tightly, waiting for the enemy army to appear over the horizon. You are not worried. You have more men. You have fought battles before. You believe this will be another easy victory. Then something strange happens. The warriors beside you stop talking. Some stare into the distance. Others slowly take a step backward. And suddenly one word starts spreading through the army. Shaka. Not screams. Not panic. Just whispers. Shaka. What? Why would experienced warriors fear one man before the battle even started? Was he stronger than everyone else? Did he have some secret weapon? Or was there another reason people became afraid the moment they heard his name? Because Shaka was not born as a powerful king. In fact, his story started very differently. And almost nobody would have predicted what was coming. Long before his name spread across battlefields, Shaka was just a boy. A boy who did not grow up surrounded by luxury. A boy who did not enter the world with power already waiting for him. No giant kingdom stood behind him. No army was standing beside him. No one looked at him and said, "That child will change history." If anything, many people would probably have believed the opposite. History often remembers powerful people at the moment they become great. But it rarely shows what happened before. The difficult moments. The rejection. The struggle. The years when nobody cared. Because legends usually do not begin looking like legends. They begin looking ordinary. And sometimes ordinary beginnings create unexpected endings. As Shaka grew older, he spent years watching the world around him. Watching leaders. Watching warriors. Watching how battles happened. Watching how people followed traditions without questioning them. People fought the same way because that was how things had always been done. Nobody stopped and asked, "What if there is a better way?" Most people accept the world exactly as it is. But some people keep asking questions. And questions can become dangerous. Because once someone starts seeing weaknesses that everyone else ignores, everything can change. But Shaka had not changed anything yet. Not yet. At this point he was still only watching. Still learning. Still waiting. And maybe that was the moment nobody understood. While others saw a young man with nothing special around him, something else was happening. Every challenge. Every struggle. Every difficult moment. They were building something. Not muscles. Not weapons. Something inside his mind. Because sometimes the people who struggle the most begin noticing things others never see. Things that comfortable people ignore. Things that later become advantages. But even then, nobody knew what was coming. Because soon Shaka would notice a problem that many people accepted as normal. A problem hidden inside the way battles were fought. And once he saw it, nothing would stay the same. The question was simple. If armies kept fighting the same way, why did so many people keep losing? And Shaka was about to search for an answer. Part 2. The question that changed everything. Most people look at a problem and accept it. They say, "That is just how things work." Battles happen. Some people win. Some people lose. Life moves on. But Shaka kept noticing something strange. Warriors trained hard. Armies prepared for battle. Leaders gave orders. Yet the same mistakes kept happening again and again. People fought using methods that had existed for a long time. And nobody seemed interested in changing them. Imagine watching people repeat the same actions for years, while expecting different results. Sooner or later someone begins asking questions. And Shaka started asking them. Questions that seemed small at first. But small questions sometimes create massive consequences. What if warriors moved differently? What if speed mattered more? What if battles ended before enemies even understood what was happening? And most importantly, what if fear itself could become a weapon? Because think about this. Before people lose with their hands, they often lose with their minds. A soldier who believes victory is impossible becomes weaker. A soldier who feels fear spreading around him starts making mistakes. And once fear begins moving through an army, it spreads faster than fire. Shaka understood something many people ignored. Battles were not only about strength. They were also about pressure, confusion, timing, fear. But asking questions is easy. Changing reality is different. Because when people become comfortable with old ideas, they usually resist new ones. And that is exactly what happened. Imagine standing in front of experienced warriors and saying, "We are going to do things differently." Many people would laugh. Many people would reject you. Many people would think, "Who does this man think he is?" Because history is full of people who were called crazy before they were called brilliant. And at first, Shaka was not surrounded by people who instantly believed him. Trust takes time. Results take time. Respect takes time. But something interesting was about to happen. People were about to notice that Shaka was seeing things differently. Very differently. And once people started seeing results, everything began changing. Slowly, whispers started spreading. People began noticing his discipline, his focus, his ability to think ahead. And the strange thing about success is this. At first nobody notices you. Then suddenly everyone notices you. The same people who ignore someone today sometimes become the same people speaking about them tomorrow. But something larger was building. Something dangerous. Because while Shaka was improving, others still had no idea what was coming. They thought future battles would look exactly like the past. They were wrong. Very wrong. Because soon enemies would face something unexpected. Not a bigger army. Not a magical weapon. Something much more dangerous. A new way of fighting. Part 3. When the rules changed. For years, warriors followed patterns. Everyone knew what battle usually looked like. Armies moved. Weapons clashed. People fought. People retreated. And then many survivors returned to fight another day. It was familiar. Predictable. Expected. But Shaka kept seeing something others missed. Predictable things become weak. Because if enemies already know what you will do, they begin preparing for it before the battle even starts. Imagine playing a game where your opponent knows your every move. How long would you survive? Probably not very long. And Shaka understood that. He knew something had to change. But nobody around him knew how serious those changes would become. At first, people may not have fully understood what they were seeing. They simply noticed something different. Training felt harder. Movement felt faster. Discipline became stricter. Expectations became greater. Suddenly, ordinary effort was no longer enough. Because Shaka believed something dangerous. Average preparation creates average results. And average results were not enough. Not for him. Not anymore. People were beginning to realize that this was not simply another leader. This was someone trying to reshape the battlefield itself. But then something happened. People started noticing changes beyond training. Changes in the warriors themselves. And that was when fear slowly began appearing. 1601 to 1800 hours. Imagine hearing stories spread from village to village. Stories becoming larger each time they are repeated. People saying, they move differently. They fight differently. Something is changing. Now imagine being an enemy hearing those whispers. You have never seen these warriors yourself. You do not know what is true. But uncertainty creates something powerful. Questions. And questions create fear. Because humans often fear what they cannot fully understand. Some enemies probably thought, they are exaggerating. Others may have laughed. But laughter disappears quickly when reality arrives. Because eventually the day always comes. The day rumors stop being rumors. The day stories become reality. The day people finally see the truth with their own eyes. And somewhere in the distance, an enemy army was preparing. They believed this would be another normal battle. Another easy victory. Another ordinary day. But they were about to discover something terrifying. The battlefield they expected no longer existed. The rules had changed. And they didn't even know it yet. Because in the next battle, some warriors would realize something strange. They were not just fighting men anymore. They were fighting an idea. And ideas can be much harder to defeat. Part 4. The first real shock. By the time enemies finally reached the battlefield, they were confident. They had seen conflict before. They had won before. They believed experience was enough. But confidence has a weakness. It only works when reality behaves the way you expect. And that day, reality did not behave. At first, everything looked normal. Armies facing each other. Silence before impact. That familiar moment before chaos begins. But something felt different. Not visible. Not loud. Just a pressure in the air. Like something had already decided the outcome. Then the movement began. Not slow. Not hesitant. Controlled. Relentless. The kind of movement that does not wait for reaction. And that is where confusion starts. Because most armies prepare for resistance. They prepare for equal force. But what happens when one side refuses to follow the same rhythm? The enemy expected time to think. Time to adjust. Time to organize. But time was not given. Every moment felt compressed. Every decision felt late. And when people feel late in battle, panic starts building quietly inside them. Not in everyone at once. but in small groups first. One mistake leads to another. One hesitation spreads. One doubt becomes many doubts. And suddenly, what looked like an organized army begins to feel unstable. This is the moment where discipline is tested. Not in training, but in chaos. Because training disappears the moment fear enters. And fear was entering quickly. But what the enemy did not understand was even more dangerous. This was not just speed. It was structure. And structure changes everything. As the battle continued, something became clear. This was not a normal clash. It was controlled pressure. Every movement pushed the enemy into tighter space. Every advance removed options. Every step forward made retreat harder. It was not about brute force alone. It was about removing choices. And when people lose choices, they start making mistakes. Not because they are weak, but because they are trapped in limited thinking. And that is where collapse begins. Not with defeat, but with confusion. And confusion spreads faster than any weapon. And that battle was only the beginning. Because the next stage would change everything people believed about war. Part 5. Fear begins to spread. After that encounter, something shifted. It was no longer just about one battle. It became a pattern. A growing reputation. Stories began traveling faster than armies. And every time the story was told again, it became stronger. Stranger. More intense. Because humans do something naturally. They exaggerate what they fear. Not always on purpose. But because fear expands in imagination. Soon, enemies were no longer hearing simple reports. They were hearing warnings. And warnings change behavior before battles even begin. Some began avoiding conflict entirely. Others began preparing differently. And some still believed they could win. But belief alone is not always enough when the mind is already uncertain. This is where psychological pressure becomes more powerful than physical force. Because now the battlefield no longer starts at contact. It starts in the mind. Before armies meet. Before weapons are raised. Before anything physical happens. The outcome is already being shaped by expectation. And expectation is dangerous. Because if you expect defeat, you begin acting like someone who has already lost. And that is when even strong armies begin to break. Not because they are weaker, but because they are already divided inside. And division always becomes visible in action. And soon even those who once laughed at the rumors would stop laughing completely. Because what they were about to face next was not just a leader. It was a completely new reality of war.